goes into or is supposed to go into here in the U.S. is what then turns around and makes it possible for businesses to thrive.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, my favorite example is probably the smartphone. So have you ever noticed, like, in like talks, or like whenever somebody mentions a smartphone, they like start to pull it out of their pocket or like, touch it. But so the federal government could not have invented the iPhone, right? Like, I don't think any of us would want a phone that was like invented by the federal government.
That thing would suck.
That is like all of the design, the manufacturing, supply chains. That's the kind of thing that corporations can do very well. Yeah. And Apple did it very well, and their competitors. But what makes the iPhone work? Well, among other things, the internet. The internet was literally invented by a federal research project. And it would never have been possible to invent the internet with a private company, because you wouldn't have got the kind of capital return. Even though it's $1 trillion idea or a multi-trillion dollar idea, you know, companies can do multi-billion dollar ideas, but $1 trillion idea, like inventing the internet.
Right.
Elon Musk once fancied himself the co-president, the second most important person in the country, but now he has become the punching bag of the West Wing, and he is certainly not happy about it, and he is letting everyone know. And as we recently saw with Elon's announcement that he will be leaving the government, he's also leaving all his thoughts out there, criticizing Donald Trump's tariffs to the point that he was screaming about it in the Oval Office, losing his mind with how upset he is with the stupidest trade war in history. And when even Elon Musk is pointing out how bad one of Donald Trump's policies is, you know it is a disaster. And the White House is doing its best to cover up this clear civil war, but Carolyn Leavitt's not doing too great of a job. We're going to get into it all, but before we do, if I could quickly ask you to leave a like on this video, and if you haven't already, and you enjoy our channel, to hit that subscribe button. It goes a long way. And it really does mean a lot to me. Now, before we can get into the article covering this crazy screaming match, I want to hear from Donald Trump's closest advisor and Steve Bannon, who had some thoughts about Elon.
It seems to me that Besant has maybe become... Do you think he is now the most important player on that economic team? I mean, is he now basically the guy running the economy?
Well, not running the economy, but he's a safe pair of hands. President Trump's a very sophisticated businessman, but Scott is a safe pair of hands that understands capital markets deeply. He's done this for 30 years. He has a very strong sense of what markets need to hear as far as information go. Okay? Remember, the first fight, besides the H-1B visas and transhumanism, the first big fight we've had with Elon was over Elon pushed Howard Lutnick, and Bannon in War Room pushed Scott Besant, and that got very nasty in Mar-a-Lago. They leaked all kind of stuff about Scott that was not true. And at the time, I said, for what President Trump's trying to do on trade, on tariffs, on taxes, on national security, you're going to need a steady Eddie, a rock, that the markets can sit there and go, that guy's telling me the truth. I may not like it, but he's telling me the truth. That's Scott Besant. And I'll be blunt. If Howard Lutnick had been Secretary of the Treasury, it would have been an unmitigated disaster. Okay? Unmitigated disaster. And this is about people putting their own interests first, like Elon, versus putting the nation's interests first.
Well, thank you, Steve.
So, for a long time, Steve Bannon has been a pretty outspoken critic of Elon, and he has defended Donald Trump's tariffs, as most people around him have, even though they know they're destroying our country and our economy. Even Donald Trump knows that the tariffs are destroying the economy. But Bannon has been pretty clear that he thinks Elon is not actually of the MAGA movement. He thinks he's just trying to use Donald Trump. And of course, Elon did get a couple more $1 billion of government contracts that he stole out of this whole ordeal. But Tesla's sales are down 71%, and he's lost more than half of the value of his corporation. So this trade didn't go super well for him if we're looking at it strictly financially. And that's why Elon is really upset on his way out. Although Donald Trump is going to keep defending his plan no matter what, which is what we saw in this pretty weird rant right here.
I said it this morning, I think some of you were there. There was a time from 1870 to 1913, it was a long time ago, we were an all-tariff nation. Foreign nations pay taxes, they paid money to us in the form of tariffs. And that was when we were the wealthiest. We were the wealthiest proportionately that we ever were. And they formed committees in 1887 in particular, but they formed committees to determine what we should do with all the money. We had so much money, you guys would have loved it. We had so much money, they didn't know what to do with it. We gave it away to different causes, and You haven't seen that too much anymore, although we give plenty away, but now we shouldn't be giving it away. We have to take care of ourselves first, right? Absolutely. But we were very wealthy, and proportionately the wealthiest we ever were. We built the Panama Canal. Jimmy Carter gave that away for $1, by the way.
So Elon is pretty outspoken about how much he hates the terrorist. Donald Trump is staying true to his favorite word and his favorite way of crashing the economy, because remember, second time he's crashed the economy. I think he does like this version more, but Elon does not. And it's why we saw an insane screaming match breakout, which was reported by the Daily Beast. We're going to get into it. Elon Musk has F-word screaming match feat from Oval Office. Elon Musk had a WWE-style screaming match with Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, feet from the Oval Office, which only ended when they were dragged apart. The fight was within earshot of Donald Trump. Two eyewitnesses told Axios an aide had to physically get between the two men to end the fight. The dispute started in the Oval Office, and the two took it outside to the hall, with Moose calling Besson a billionaire in his own right. Failed. The first fight last Tuesday was over who should run the IRS. The argument stemmed from Gary Shapley, a former IRS agent who was a whistleblower on Hunter Biden, being made acting commissioner of the IRS the day before the fight. Shapley was Musk's choice, while Besson wanted his deputy Mike Fallander to get the job. Besson accused Musk of going over his head to see that Shapley was named to the role. A source told Axios that Besson confronted Musk about the move, and the F-bomb started to fly. Besson also accused Musk of not fulfilling expectations he had laid out regarding Doge, while Moose said the Treasury Secretary was a Soros agent who had run a failed hedge fund. It was two billionaire middle-aged men thinking it was the WWE in the hall of the West Wing. A witness told the outlet, which reported that an aide had to separate the two. A second witness added of the exchange, "I was quite a scene. It was loud, and I mean loud." When asked to comment, White House Press Secretary Carolyn Leavitt didn't deny the dust-up. It was no secret President Trump has put together a team of people who are incredibly passionate about the issues impacting our country. She said, "Disagreements are a normal part of any healthy policy process. Ultimately, everyone knows they serve at the pleasure of the president." Since Trump's personal announcement, Bessent seems to have won. Shapley was removed Friday and replaced by Fallander just 3 days after being appointed. It seems like the White House is unhappy with how chaotic everyone can clearly see it is over there. And I've talked about this a lot, that we can't just view this chaos in the White House as business as usual for Donald Trump and his administration. We have to point out that how much they have destabilized our country does have a real economic impact. When Elon Musk and Scott Bessent are screaming about the IRS or tariffs, or Trump is saying insane things about whatever the topic may be, it continues to dissuade countries from trusting us, wanting to continue to be our allies, and wanting to invest in America, which ultimately makes our economy worse. Republicans like to brush it off as mean tweets, but no, there is a real impact to all of this. And Doge is a perfect example, which Pete Buttigieg outlined why right here.
Goes into, or is supposed to go into, here in the U.S., is what then turns around and makes it possible for businesses to thrive.
Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah, my favorite example is probably the smartphone. So, but have you ever noticed, like in like talks, or like whenever somebody mentions a smartphone, they like start to pull it out of their pocket or like, touch it. But so the federal government could not have invented the iPhone, right? Like I don't think any of us would want a phone that was like invented by the federal government.
That thing would suck.
That is like all of the design, the manufacturing, supply chains. That's the kind of thing that corporations can do very well, and Apple did it very well, and their competitors. But what makes the iPhone work? Well, among other things, the internet. The internet was literally invented by a federal research project. And it would never have been possible to invent the internet with a private company because you wouldn't have got the kind of capital return, even though it's a $1 trillion idea or a multi-trillion dollar idea. You know, companies can do multi-billion dollar ideas, but a $1 trillion idea, like inventing the internet, that requires basic research. And that's the kind of thing the government's supposed to do, among many other things.
It requires basic research? What does that mean?
Yeah, by basic research, I mean things that are so fundamental that you actually don't know for 50 or 100 years if they're going to have a return. They might never work out.
Oh, right? Yeah. You can't look at it as this thing is going to be profitable. It has to be
so it's different
benevolent
from
endeavor for society.
Yeah, it's different from research on like a pharmaceutical company researches a new medication, expecting that they're going to
have a return in the next 10, 20 years.
Right, at least kind of within the kind of profit horizon.
But public parks is another version of this and stuff like that.
Yeah,
you can't privatize the public park.
Right. This is the whole idea of public goods. Right? This is why we have governments, why we collect taxes.
God, we're turning into such libs already, dude.
But there's a handshake, right? There are the things that only the government can do, and then there are the things that the private sector can and should do, and they meet in the middle. But if you start shorting, and part of what really worries me right now about this kind of war on academia, and there are some things about academia that need to change, but the war on academia, the cuts to cancer research, the cuts to science research, this kind of like general anti-science like atmosphere that I think is emanating from the administration, like that costs us in ways that don't show up on a corporate profit and loss statement 6 months from now or a year from now. But in terms of whether a country, a society, an economy is productive and is growing and is innovating, that starts to really cost you over time. And if we're shorting that, or if corporations and extremely wealthy people don't want to be paying into that through taxes, that is, I think, a classic example of a kind of short-term gain that causes long-term pain.
Elon Musk and other billionaires want people to distrust the government. They want it to not work. They want it to break so they can point to how broken it is and say, look, maybe we should get rid of all this stuff so we can get a bigger tax cut. That's what Elon Musk is going to end up getting. But he's also leaving with his tail between his legs, less political power than when he started, and maybe a potential enemy in Donald Trump. We'll have to see. But one thing we do know we have to do is call him out until he's gone, and then even after that, which is what we're going to be doing on this show. And if you want to support that, as always, you can hit that subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and if you stuck around to the end, drop a blue heart in the comments. And until next time, I'll see you soon. And until next time, I'll see you soon.